For the next 6 days, I'm taking you on a journey, not through American history, but through the ideas that built America. 6 very brief monologues, starting with this one. Because in just a few days, we'll celebrate our nation's 250th birthday. But on July 5th, after the fireworks are gone and the flags are folded away, I want to answer the question almost nobody is asking. What kind of Americans will carry this nation through the next 250 years? Because America at 250 isn't simply an anniversary, it's an inflection point. Every milestone eventually forces a civilization to ask not where it's been, but where it's going. To answer that question, we first have to remember what happened 250 years ago. And I don't think most Americans actually do understand it. Because America wasn't born when 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence. America was born when ordinary people decided there were things more valuable than comfort, more valuable than safety, even more valuable than life itself. When those 56 men signed the Declaration, they weren't participating in a ceremony. They were signing what many believed would become their death warrants. If the revolution failed, they wouldn't simply lose an election, they would hang. That's why the final words of the Declaration have always moved me. We mutually pledged to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Those weren't poetic words. They were promises. Some would lose their fortunes. Some would lose their homes. Some would bury sons before the war was over. They knew the cost. They signed anyways. Not because victory was guaranteed, but because they believed there were moments when principle matters more than outcome. A few months before the Declaration, Thomas Paine wrote something remarkable in Common Sense. He said, "A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right." He was writing about monarchy, but his warning reaches every generation. Years later, Abraham Lincoln would say that Jefferson placed into the Declaration an abstract truth applicable to all men at all times. That's why we're still talking about it 250 years later. Because great ideas don't expire. Every generation drifts. Every generation slowly becomes accustomed to things its grandparents would have questioned. That's why anniversaries matter. Not because they make us nostalgic, because they force us to stop and ask whether we've drifted from the ideas that made us who we are. Here's what I hope you'll discover over the next 6 days. The American experiment has never depended primarily on politicians. It has depended on people. On mothers and fathers, on churches, on neighbors, on citizens who believed liberty demanded responsibility, who understood that freedom is not merely something you inherit, it's something you steward. That's why this series isn't really about the Founding Fathers. It's about us. Because one day another generation will look back on ours the same way we looked back on theirs. They won't ask what trended. They won't ask who won every political fight. They'll ask whether we were faithful stewards of what we inherited, whether we strengthened it or squandered it. For the next 5 days, we're going to revisit the virtues that built the country, not to admire the past, but to measure ourselves against it. Because the American experiment is still unfolding, and every generation decides whether it continues. Tomorrow, we will begin with the first virtue that made all others possible: courage.